We have to be concerned with the euro crisis, with the debt issues in Europe, in the US, in Japan. And of course, there are also some emerging issues in some of the developing markets. But I think we should not forget the long-term prospects. So we see every year 50 to 100 million new consumers, workers, entrepreneurs coming into the market as in the emerging markets. We see many more companies are being set up, mostly of course in emerging markets, but also I think also in the developed markets. And we see business models changing. So while short term we have significant issues, the longer term prospects for growth around the world and for many businesses doing very well, I think are enormous. But it takes really courage. It takes, I think, clear ambitions and persistence to make it work. But I have no doubt when we look back in 10 years' time to this second decade in the century, we'll find it was a prosperous one. Even though in some parts of the world, like in Europe, we may see only very limited growth. I think we have to take this very seriously. In '89, when the Iron Curtain came down, people said communism is dead. And through the crisis then in 2009, many people said capitalism is dead. And there is indeed a lot of criticism. Markets seem to have gone the wrong way. Greed and fraud seems to rule. And there has been also a lot of or increasing inequality in many parts of the world. And so that is the base for the backlash that we're seeing at the moment. It is, of course, a very big concern that that profits have been privatized before the crisis. We saw this enormous boom until 2007, even 2008, and then many of the losses are being socialized. And so it's not that capitalism is not working or market economies are not working. They do working much better than what we've seen in the socialist countries beforehand. They've given people a lot better standard of living over many decades. But I think we need to make sure that we're not getting into waves of exaggeration. We've seen this during the e-commerce boom, 99, 2000. We've seen it again, the following years. And when you deregulate, when you are not reining in, if you offer, like some of the governments did, subsidies for all kinds of things, some companies, some people will always make use of them and will use them for fraud. So wherever there are subsidies, there's fraud, and there are people who are using it excessively. I think, first of all, we need to remember that the large majority of banks are doing a very solid and very good job. Banks who are serving retail customers, who are serving small, medium enterprises with loans, providing opportunities for deposits, and really providing basic services. And we should not forget that without those basic services, people have to resort to the grey markets and all the extortions that go with those. But again, as we've talked about beforehand about exaggerations, when you find people who use the system in order to sell products that have no value, that the customers don't understand, if there is no regulation on those markets, if banks take on businesses, transactions that they don't understand, and when they then fail, expect, because of the systemic risks, the government to pick up the bill, I think that is something where we have to rein in. And also the combination of investment banking with commercial banking has led to some of those distortions. I think it's not just a two-speed world economy, but it's also a world economy with two very different mindsets. Obviously based on also on the two speeds. I think on the one hand we see in the developed world we see low growth, but we also see the very strong issue certainly in Europe and Japan of demographics, which with a very strongly aging population. We see efforts to protect yourself against change which comes through the globalization, and we have a strong sense of entitlement. So what we see is a large part of the populations in Europe, Japan, part in North America do not look to the future with optimism. They do not expect their children to have a higher standard of living. Actually, maybe they fear that they will have a lower standard of living. So I think they worry about the future, and so they try to protect the status quo. Very differently in the emerging markets. They're not satisfied with what they have, so they have high aspirations for the future. They are willing to work very hard. They want to build something. Very simple people, who we are also interviewing in our surveys. I find, for example, a woman here in India. She could not read or write, but she clearly wanted all her 4 children, two girls, 2 boys, to learn, to go to school. She wanted her husband to have a motorcycle, to go somewhat further away, to have a better job. She was using an old sewing machine to earn some money on the side. So they have very, very strong aspirations for the future. And that's also true not only for the so-called man or woman on the street, but also for those, for companies and so forth. And so we need to, I think what we need in the world is the emerging market mindset. So to really continue to build for the future and not try to protect the status quo. I think there are quite a number of opportunities and challenges. I think first of all, globalization is one of the biggest opportunities, and it means we have to really globalize our organizations. There are very few global companies. Most companies are operating internationally, but their management is very domestic. Most of the German companies have a German management. The French are French. The US is American. The Japanese are Japanese, and so forth. And of course, you also see this: the Koreans, the Chinese, the Indians. So I think we will see over the next 10 years that in the top management of companies, we'll see a lot more nationalities, people with very different backgrounds. And it's quite important, because otherwise you do not fully understand what's going on in other parts of the world. I think indeed, if corporate social responsibility is a glossy brochure, you are failing. And just pointing out that you are doing some nice projects is not sufficient. I think the way you work as a company has to be fully integrated into the activities of society. You mentioned sustainability. I think many companies have started looking very carefully at their own operations. How can you make your operations sustainable, more sustainable? And if there are good economic reasons. If you can cut your energy consumption, if you can cut the use of resources in general, that makes you more profitable. Yeah. It also makes you more responsible within the society you are working.